Have you ever seen something that nobody else can see? I mean, from your perspective, it's as clear as can be. So obvious and vivid that you notice every minute detail. But everyone else around you, they just can't see it. And no matter how hard you try to point it out to them, they don't believe you. They think you're hallucinating. They think you're crazy. They try putting you in a mental hospital, thinking your brain and your eyes are playing tricks on you. And yeah, maybe for a time you believe them. You think maybe you are crazy. That alone is a scary thought. But you know what's even scarier? Being completely sane and still seeing these things. That means you may not be crazy, but what you're seeing is real. And if it's real, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry, I'm still getting used to the idea that the things I see are actually there. And trust me, that has a lot of implications. In fact, just seeing things clearly in general is still a relatively new feeling for me. But maybe that's where I need to begin. And hopefully, that'll help make sense of everything. To a point, that is. Whether or not anyone listening to this believes me, I guess I can't control that. All I can do is share what I've seen. And that's very relevant because for a good chunk of my life, I've dealt with exceedingly poor vision. I found out in the first grade that I needed glasses. Now, that news didn't come as a surprise to anyone. Pretty much everyone in my family wears glasses, including both my parents, my two older siblings, most of my aunts, and all but two of my uncles. Hell, my grandfather once said that poor eyesight might as well be our family legacy. But even after I got glasses, and even after they helped me stop squinting and see clearly, I hated them. Yeah, I know it sounds petty and vain, but I really did not like how my glasses made me look. I certainly won't say they made me look ugly, but every time I put them on, every time I looked in a mirror, I just felt unattractive in general. And sure, my parents, teachers, and friends always tried to reassure me, saying that they made me look smart and dignified. But that only helped so much. I still felt like a dork, and I wanted nothing more than to be rid of them. But for most of my youth, that seemed all but impossible. Me wanting to get rid of my glasses? Hell, I might as well have wished for superpowers, a flying car, or $1 billion. And it also didn't help that my vision was getting progressively worse as I got older. By the time I finished high school, my vision was so bad that my lenses needed to be special ordered. And if I wasn't wearing my glasses, I was practically blind. Everything and everyone around me was just a big, unidentifiable blur. It eventually got to a point where my doctor said contact lenses were no longer viable. But that was never a solution in my mind. I only tried contacts for a few months before they became too much. I just hated how they felt and how much went into caring for them. And for a time, I was genuinely scared that I might end up completely blind at some point in my life. Then, I learned about LASIK eye surgery, and that immediately became my one true hope for better vision. I distinctly remember seeing that first commercial. I also vividly remember visiting this website detailing the procedure, the limitations, and the cost. It almost felt like a sign, a true reprieve for someone like me, someone who had lost the genetic lottery for eyesight. Now, I knew it would come at a cost. That was never lost on me. I never thought the cost would go beyond the money. Because that part actually ended up being easy, relatively speaking. Because even before I graduated high school, I made clear to everyone in my family that I was going to pursue LASIK surgery. Forget a nice car, forget going to a fancy college. I was going to save up my own money to get my vision fixed. Now, some of that didn't go over well with my parents, especially when I asked about the money they'd saved for my college education. They still kept telling me that I shouldn't be so self-conscious about wearing glasses. But I had already made up my mind. I was going to do this even if they weren't going to support me. As a result, I aimed pretty low for my college applications, eventually opting for the cheapest possible option. I also started working relatively young, doing any job that would pay me just enough to save some extra cash on the side. Because I knew for certain that insurance wasn't going to pay for LASIK eye surgery, and it's not like anyone in my family was rich enough to foot the bill. So saving up money for the procedure, it was a grind, that's for sure. I had to work a lot of jobs I didn't like. I also had to limit my college experience to stuff that would make for a more lucrative career. So yeah, I missed out on a lot of parties and a lot of typical college experiences. But eventually, it did pay off. Despite having to live with my parents, working multiple jobs, and saving every penny I could, I finally had enough to get the procedure. That too turned out to be a bit of a challenge. Multiple doctors said that my vision was so bad, they weren't even sure that LASIK eye surgery would work. A few even warned me that it could damage my eyes even more. But that still didn't dissuade me. My glasses weren't getting any less cumbersome, nor were they getting any less thick. It did take a few consultations, but I finally found a doctor who said he could do it. He still claimed it was risky. He even said he couldn't find a single case of someone getting LASIK with eyesight as bad as mine. But he also seemed eager to rise to the challenge, and the procedure had advanced to a point where they could afford to push the envelope. And if I was among the first to benefit from it, so be it. I'll never forget the day my procedure was scheduled. I had marked my calendar, made travel arrangements, and even made sure I had a full week off from work. Every morning leading up to it, I would put on my glasses and say how many days left I had to endure these ugly, thick frames. And when that day came, I was just so anxious and excited. My mother said I acted like it was my wedding day or something. My perception of time really got weird that day, from going to the hospital to preparing for the procedure. I won't recount all the medications involved, but the doctor told me it would take longer than most, given how bad my vision was. He also told me recovery would take a bit longer, but if it meant a lifetime of better vision, I was more than happy to endure that. And so, I went through with the procedure. I took these green pills that nearly knocked me out. I then laid on this special operating table for, hell, I still don't know how long it was. But what mattered most to me is that when I finally got up, I could immediately feel the difference. Everything in front of me, what had once been this big, blurry blob, it was just so clear. I could actually read the signs on the wall just a few feet in front of me. I actually cried tears of joy at that moment. And no, it wasn't just because of the drugs they gave me. I was just so happy and elated. I hugged every doctor and nurse at that facility. And yeah, I still had a rough recovery over the next few days. I actually had to black out my bedroom windows at some point to limit the glare. But by the end of the week, this once impossible dream was real. I could see clearly. I didn't need my glasses anymore. And the next few months, they were the happiest of my life. There was just something so inherently joyous about waking up in the morning and not reaching for my glasses just to read my alarm clock. It also gave me a confidence that I'd never had before. Friends and coworkers alike would say I had this new glow to me, as though I had been reborn anew. Now, I laughed that off, but I couldn't argue with the results. In that short span of time, I landed more dates, more friends, and more happiness than I ever thought possible. And yeah, I was still broke after spending all my money on the procedure, but I didn't care. I had a whole new lease on life, as well as clear, unobstructed vision. But that feeling, that experience, that joy, it didn't last. Long after I made a full recovery, long after my doctors gave me a clean bill of health, I started seeing things that others weren't seeing. Things I don't think anyone was supposed to see, even with perfect vision. The first time it happened, I was on the bus that I rode to work every morning. I got on at the same time as I always do. Then, a few stops later, this guy gets on. Now, from the neck down, he looked typical. Normal clothes, normal stature, normal everything. But his face, his whole entire head, it wasn't normal. It wasn't even human. Just take your stereotypical idea of a demon, make it a lot less cartoonish, a lot more horrifying, and way more graphic. And that's what this guy's head looked like. Dark red skin, deep wrinkles accentuated by scars and moles, and greasy dark hair that looked like the tail of a dead horse. I swear I gagged a bit on my own bile at that moment. But what made it even more disturbing was that the guy was so casual. And nobody else on the bus, not the driver, not the other passengers, they didn't seem to notice. Even when they looked at him directly, they didn't react at all. Now, thankfully, he didn't sit next to me. But he did sit in the seat just across from me. And he didn't pay me much mind, even as I kept staring at him. Now, for the record, this also happened to be just a few weeks before Halloween. So at first, I figured this guy was just going all out for some sort of Halloween event. I tried to look closer to confirm that it was some sort of elaborate mask, but I might have looked a little too close. Because the guy eventually looks at me, that horrifying face of his making me gag again. And when he sees my reaction, he got visibly angry.
The hell you looking at?
I stammered in response. I don't remember what I said. I think I remarked at how great I thought his mask was. Might have even said something about how great it'll be on Halloween. But that just made him angrier.
You think you're funny? You saying I'm ugly?
The guy got really hostile, so much so that I had to get off at the next stop and walk the rest of the way to work. I didn't mind, but I do remember the driver and multiple passengers looking at me strangely. I even tried to gesture towards the man's head, as though it were the most obvious thing in the world. But they did not see what I was seeing. From their perspective, they just saw some guy telling a total stranger that his face was as ugly as a demon. It really freaked me out, and I was all too eager to forget about it. But later on that same day while I'm at work, this woman comes in with an outside consulting team, something that's fairly typical at my office. She arrives with 5 other people, and they all look normal. But this woman, her head was even more horrifying than the man on the bus. It was like somebody from hell had designed it in every disturbing detail. Now, I was tempted to just slip away, but I decided to keep my silence, hiding my revulsion just to see if anyone else noticed. And much to my dismay, no one did. Everyone treated this woman as though she were just another consultant. She spoke with a normal-sounding voice, at least from a distance. But at one point, she looked towards me. She smiled, I think. It was really hard to tell on that monstrous face. I don't think I did a good job enough of hiding my reaction. When she finally did speak, her voice did not sound entirely human.
Is there something on my face? You look troubled.
I ended up pretending to feel sick. Told my boss that I had a migraine or something. Thankfully, he gave me the rest of the day off. So I ran home, calling a cab rather than taking the bus. I ended up taking a long shower, crawling into bed, and sleeping for the rest of the afternoon. I still couldn't tell you what I was thinking. Maybe I just hoped that I had some sort of mental breakdown, or that I ate something that didn't agree with me. I really, really wanted that to be the case. It would have been a lot easier. But things just got more disturbing from there. Because a few hours later, I crawled out of bed. I hoped in vain that what I saw was behind me. So I turned on the TV to watch the evening news. But that's when I knew for certain that what I saw, it was not all in my head. Because the main story with that evening was about a man who had brutally murdered 3 people. He'd been stalking this family on the same block where he lived, plotting and planning this horrific deed. Then, early that morning, he broke in while they were eating breakfast, tied all three of them up, and actually, I'd rather spare everyone the details. But the worst part was, when they showed the image of the man, it showed the same man from the bus. I didn't recognize his face, but I definitely recognized his clothes. They were identical to what I saw, and near as I could tell, he'd been on his way to commit this brutal act when I saw him. It left me feeling sick for real this time. But one instance was just a fluke, easy to discard as just some obscenely random coincidence. But twice, that would be too much to ignore. And wouldn't you know it, that same news report had another story about another heinous crime. That woman from the consulting team, she had been arrested earlier that afternoon. The cops stated that they had actually been waiting for her outside my office building. One of the security guards that I knew personally had recognized her. He claimed that this woman was wanted for abducting and killing multiple teenage boys across several states. She was a very sadistic person, and those are the cops' words, not mine. But she'd been hiding her misdeeds for years. She seemed to do a good job of it until... I honestly don't know. I can't remember how the police say they caught her. But that doesn't change the fact that I saw something that no one else could see. I saw the monsters these people truly were. Whether they were already guilty of heinous acts or on their way to commit them, I saw them. And after that fateful day, that started what began a rapid decline for me, both mentally and physically. Every time I went out, be it to work, the grocery store, or just getting the mail, I would see someone whose entire head had been replaced with a demon. They always looked different, but it always carried the same implication. Either it revealed someone who had done some horrific atrocity, or it revealed someone who was about to commit an atrocity. To everyone else, they still looked normal. But to me, it was like some otherworldly force was taunting me, making me see something that I shouldn't be seeing, something no one would even want to see. Needless to say, I became a lot more reclusive after that. I didn't go out as much. I tried to stay away from crowds. I even started wearing sunglasses to hide any reaction I had to seeing one of these monsters. And yeah, the irony isn't lost on me either. I spent my whole life hating having to wear glasses, yet here I was, my vision apparently fixed, but I still had to wear glasses just for a very different reason. And despite all of this, I still tried my best to live my life. I sure as hell couldn't tell anyone about what I was seeing. I didn't need the whole world thinking I was crazy. I just had to get used to seeing people with demon heads, knowing they had or were about to do something horrific. But try as I might, there are just some things you can't get used to. It eventually took a toll on me, so much so that it affected my work. One day, I came into work and saw a coworker that I had known for years, but his face, his head, and his voice, it had all been replaced by a monster. Even though he greeted me like he always did, I just couldn't hide my reaction. I actually grabbed him and said, "What did you do? What are you going to do? What is it?" I still don't know what possessed me to grab him by the collar and pin him against the wall. But his face, his monstrous, demonic face was so disgusting that I acted on instinct. And while I was holding him close, my face just a few inches from his horrific complexion, I swear I heard a voice, one other than the voice of my coworker. I couldn't make out what it was. A security guard and another coworker had pulled me away before I could listen. I never even got another opportunity. In the eyes of my company, this incident counted as an assault. And since I suck at lying and couldn't tell the truth, I ended up getting fired on the spot. As for my coworker, he probably could have pressed charges, had I not learned later that week that he'd been horribly abusing his children. The same children who'd adorned multiple pictures on his desk, no less. It was a hell of a turn for my life. Just a few months ago, I get my sight fixed. Now I'm out of a job, I'm living with my parents and have less than a couple $100 in my bank account. I was not in a good place, and my parents weren't happy with me nearly getting arrested, nor were they happy with the prospect of me living at home for even longer. They had talked about wanting to sell the house and prepare for retirement. They told me long before I got LASIK surgery that I had to find a new living situation by the end of the year. They weren't going to throw me out, but they weren't going to let me just barricade myself in my room. Now, things did get pretty tense for a while. I don't think I left the house for a few weeks after I got fired. And I honestly wasn't sure what I was going to do. I contemplated telling someone about how I was seeing demons, hoping against all hope that I wouldn't get sent to a mental hospital. I ended up deciding not to, opting to just look for another job. But before I could even submit a resume, some new neighbors had moved in down the street from my parents. A guy and his brother were moving into this shared house, one that often housed students at the nearby community college. Now, this was normal for my neighborhood. I'd seen it many times before. But one of the guys, well, let's just say that he had a smile that only a demon mother could love. Now, this was a truly worst-case scenario. All the other times I saw these monsters, I was away from my home and out in the open. I never had to deal with one of these things living so close to my home and my family. I immediately went into panic mode. I now knew that this guy was either going to do something awful or had already done something awful that would make the news for all the wrong reasons. I guess I didn't react fast enough because the man with the demon head saw me and waved. I did not wave back, but he must have sensed something because he started walking towards me. Now, at the time, my parents weren't home. It was the middle of the day. It was also cloudy outside and a storm was rolling in. I didn't know what I was going to do or say, so I ended up stumbling clumsily back into the front door. But this guy with the demon head just keeps coming. I even hear him shouting towards me.
Hey, you got a moment?
Even from a distance, I could hear a demonic twinge in his voice. And as he gets closer, I get even more anxious. I end up reaching into the nearby closet in the foyer. I grab the heaviest thing I could find, which happens to be a baseball bat. The man arrives, and in my panic, I didn't fully close the front door. So when this guy actually walks in, I hit him with the bat. The sound of the wood hitting bone and flesh, the noise this man or monster made when I hit him, it's etched in my memory for the rest of my life. But if that were the most disturbing part of that memory, I could still live with it. Unfortunately, I'm just not that lucky. At first, I just stood over this unconscious figure in horror of what I'd done, worried that I might have killed someone. So, despite the guy having a demonic head, I turned him over. And much to my relief, relatively speaking, he was still breathing. But that relief didn't last, because while the man was unconscious, the demon was not. And before I tell you what he said, know that by the time this is online, I'll have already gone into hiding. Do not bother trying to find me. Even my family won't be able to follow where I'm going. But after seeing what I've seen, knowing what I now know, the best option for someone like me is to just disappear. As for everyone else, that I honestly don't know. I'll just relay what the demon told me and pray that nobody else ever sees what I can see.
Your eyes, they are different. You can see me. You must be the one my brethren have spoken of. Even as we inhabit the unfortunate souls of our vessels, you are not deceived. That is concerning. Human beings, especially those such as you, were never meant to see things as they truly are. There's a reason why forces beyond even us have obscured your vision. To see the evil that lurks within others, to know when they have latched onto a soul. This invites a great deal of scrutiny, and we cannot have that. For if too many humans know what lurks within so many, if too many know what draws them to the evil they commit, that could be a problem. A problem that would require a most unpleasant recourse.